Welcome back to my studio. I'm Sean Wallis. Today we're going to be doing our third and final installment of our Tetons painting. We're going to be doing a lot of brush finish work and a lot of palette knife finish work. If you're wondering some of my techniques on using the palette knife, I'd encourage you to go to my video that specializes on palette knife painting. Also, if this is the first video where you're joining me, welcome. But you can also see the first two installments of this painting, the drawing and the blocking in, on my channel, so go view those. Also, I would like to encourage anyone who's been doing this painting along with me, anyone who has tried some of the techniques that I've shared during this painting, I'd encourage you to upload pictures of your work. I would love to see them. I would love to give you advice, interact in that way. So feel free to share, and I'll look forward to seeing any of your submissions. So if you'll remember last time we worked on blocking in our major shapes, colors, and values. Now I want to start to get into some of the detail, and I want to start by working on my center of interest. Remember, we did a value. We jumped from dark value to the next lightest, to the next lightest, to the next lightest, until we landed up in these clouds somewhere. And the reason we did that was so you could follow along adjusting your values. And we do that because it's important to let these mountains sit back in the distance. You'll notice that these peaks look like they are more forward, closer to you than this back peak, and that is because of that progression of value, or light and dark. But now it's time that we start recording some of our detail. And so I want to start actually up in the mountains, up in our center of interest, this peak here. And I want to start recording where some of these glaciers are. So I'm looking at their basic shape. Their value is pretty light because they are snow. And what I've mixed is a combination of white and a little bit of royal blue. My medium is resin oil. I'm still using a little bit of medium at this stage. Now you can use the shape to define some of these areas. You don't have to stay married to one certain shape, especially when you're coming in with the finish work. What you really want to focus on is what is going to accentuate the parts of your painting that you feel are important. And so bringing the white of the snow around this peak is going to help to set that peak apart. And then we want some on the sun side to be a little more yellow. Because the more light is hitting them. So one thing that I'm doing as I go through this painting is I'm still refining. Always refining. So I want to make sure that these shapes make sense And in a landscape, I'm less worried about accurate. I'm more worried about they make sense to the eye. Because if they don't, then we've got problems. So I'm looking at these shapes, deciding whether or not they work. So one fun thing about this area is at this stage in the painting, I can actually come in with my palette knife and add a little bit of texture to things. Just by dragging it across what I've already put on there. And if you use a slightly lighter value and let those accents sit, then it gives it a really cool textured effect. Using that bubblegum pink to just give my mountains a little bit of a purplish tint in some places. And I can offset that a little bit with blues and browns to just gray it up. But you want to rely heavily on the blues in your mixtures, blues and grays, when you're painting into the background of a painting. And where these mountains are the farthest landform in the painting, we're going to want to make sure that they are a bluish gray. Now as we move back into this back peak, I want to mix a little white and a little more of that royal blue in, because it is just slightly farther away. Now we can start to come in with the highlighted colors, which is kind of a cool color. I'll start with some white. I want to add a little bit of magenta, a little bit of orange. We'll just see what that mixes up to be. And it's pretty vibrant, and since this is off into the distance, I'm going to add a little white and a little blue just to calm it down a little bit. And looking back at that, there's probably just a touch more pink to it. Being careful not to overmix, because I like that marbling. I can then take my palette knife and start to highlight some of this mountain. It's starting to look like a mountain that is just getting touched by the sun, which is the goal. And do the same thing to this one. Then if I take these two piles and I mix them together, I can get a middle value. And that middle value can change it from just light and dark sides to more of a rounded mountain effect. Because you're going to get lighter and darker places all throughout a mountain. A little more blue for that background. Now I can come back in with a little thicker white paint and finish off the glaciers that are up there. A little white and a tiny bit of lemon yellow, maybe a touch of orange into the white mixture is a good way to make it look like sun is hitting a portion of snow. One thing that's nice about sable hair brushes too is if you find that you've got a lot of chunk happening in here from the palette knife and you want to kind of knock it down a little bit, coming over it lightly with a sable hair brush can do a good job of blending some of these things in without ruining the color or shape. So it's important in a place like this to really decide where you're going to put major shapes and then let them live on their own. Because if you just try to paint every little detail, unless you're wanting to spend a lot of time in those details, you're going to want to get like values and like colors and make actual block shapes out of them and make sense of an area that is just largely a jumble of different trees. One thing that I try to focus on is nice color. Even more than accurate color. I want to mix colors that are nice to look at, and that is my own artistic preference. I guess that's the romanticism in my own painting, is that I really want all of my colors to look good. So I'm using the knife here to just kind of get some undertones in before those darker trees come up. But you can see that I've made a distinct shape here, a distinct shape here. These lighter shapes are distinct. That's important for making sense to the eye. Nobody wants to look at a mess, they want to look at something that is organized. And so as the artist, it's your job to organize it. Then I can come in with the brush and start to get a little more detail in. One kind of cool detail that I want to get in is this burnt green. That's the tops of these pine trees here as that evening sun is hitting them. So just turning my brush sideways, loaded with quite a bit of paint, I can come in and create the tops of those trees, mixing in some vertical strokes so it doesn't look like a picket fence. Now more palette knife work, darkening things a little bit as they have come forward, using alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue to just kind of darken. I notice that right at the base of this I've got a really dark shape. It comes up this way. Then a dark but slightly warmer shape over this way. So add a little bit of Mars red into it. If you ever find it's getting too purple on you, a really good color to knock that down is Indian yellow. I'm careful not to overmix with the palette knife. I like the marbling. And then for my highlight color, my permanent green light with a little bit of yellow ochre and yellow. Now the base of this little island that sticks out here is really bright. Brightest tone in the entire painting except for the clouds. So I want to get that recorded. Now, without spending too much time on detail in these rocks, I do need to lighten them a little bit. So just mixing a little more white into the mixture I've already used for them, I need to come in and just highlight. So when I'm painting water, as the water's farther away, I'm using all horizontal strokes. But as I start to get down into this area where it's closer to me, I want to start using vertical strokes. And I'll show you why in a minute, but one thing that's neat about the Tetons and what's beautiful about that area is how green the water gets when it comes right up to you. You can see I'm pulling down some pretty bright green colors, and as it gets closer to you, those green colors will warm. And that is largely in part because of what is growing in the water and the plant life in the water gives it its neat color. And so this stuff is kind of dried. It's not fully dry, but it's dry enough that I can't do with it what I want to. So what I'm going to have to do is come back in and repaint some of it. And I want to also bring in some of the colors that I've placed into those trees that may not be necessarily in the photograph, but I've put them in there, and shapes I've put in there with artistic license. So getting my darks established in the water is important. That's what's going to give it its depth. Then I can come through with some of these colors that I have put in. Now, again, I'm using just vertical strokes. Then I want to come back in with those rock colors, and bring some fresh paint down from those. Maybe even some of my tree trunk colors. Now once I've got all wet paint and all the values that I want in this foreground all pulled down, then I can take my sable hair brush and I can start to work through that wet paint with a clean brush and start to make it look a bit more like water. Now there's a million different ways to paint water. This is just one. But now that I've got them down, I can come in and start to really bring a few horizontal strokes in. You can see it's starting to lay flat, and if you feel like you've overworked it, just clean your brush and pull them down again. And you can always come back across too until you feel like you've got it looking good and wet, like there's some current to it. So all we have left now is the sky and the foreground. And the reason why I've left the sky to last, that might seem a little bit strange, but I want to wait on the sky because looking at the photo, there's no real sense of time except for right up in here in the photo. This was actually a later evening, but since I'm a painter, not a photographer, catching the light is a little difficult for me. With a camera, it's a little easier for me in paint. And so I've left the sky alone for now because I want to come back in and make sure that my painting has an evening feel to it. And so then I can put in more of an evening sky. So now I'm going to be working in this area here, and once that's done, this painting is going to be finished. Now, as you can tell by my style, since this is the first completed painting I've done on YouTube, I'm fairly loose and impressionistic. There is some stuff floating around in my water here that I don't want floating around. But I'm loose and impressionistic. I really enjoy painting that way. I really do believe that you should paint to your personality. If you are a very orderly type person, you should probably focus more on detail type paintings, more realism. I, however, am not. I enjoy painting quickly. I enjoy seeing a quick result. And I enjoy painting outside. And so those things all lend me to believe that I should paint impressionistically. So bringing down that tree trunk first, then I can paint over the top of that and it'll kind of disappear, but hide in there as well. One thing you have to get away from when you are painting pine trees especially, but any kind of tree really, you have to get away from painting what you've always thought a pine tree looks like, or any tree. The cone shape, Christmas tree looking thing. When the pine trees grow out in nature, they actually take on a very less organized appearance. And so you need to work at forcing yourself out of that box, allowing yourself to experiment a little bit. I'm painting the shadow side of the pine tree here. I'm using big, bold knife strokes. You can tell it's coming towards the end of the painting since I'm running out of paint left, right, and center. You'll notice that I don't paint with a lot of green. I just like to kind of highlight with it. Green can get overwhelming in a landscape pretty quickly. So I like to use other colors, especially in the dark areas. Any blue with Indian yellow can make a nice green. Cleaning off my knife regularly helps me to keep pure, nice color going onto the canvas, rather than getting it muddy with everything else that I've mixed. Now I can move down here. I'm using a very light touch with that knife. And if you'd like to know more about my technique with a knife, go watch the video I made about it where I talk about different knife strokes and how to use them. That Mars red goes a long way. A tiny little bit of it does quite a bit. So you got to kind of be careful with that color a little bit. Alright, now I'm ready to rework that sky. Sky is one of the only places where I will use medium when I'm finishing. Cutting into these clouds to give them more of a wispy appearance. I don't like to overwork clouds. I like to keep, for the most part, my brush strokes fairly quick. Then comes everybody's favorite part of a painting, right? Signing it. Alright, there it is. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed watching me paint this painting, and I hope some of you painted along with me. And if you didn't this time, I hope you'll go back, maybe try it, or maybe paint along with me in some of my other videos. Again, you can go back to the first 2 videos of this series and see me draw this one in, block it in, and then today finish it off. I hope you enjoy my painting, I hope you enjoy my style, and I hope that you keep watching. Thanks.